What lurks behind this unassuming storefronts in Cleveland, Ohio? It's the Buckland Museum of Witchcraft and Magic. Learn the history of Wicca and the tale of those who brought it to the United States. See the tools of magic, once used by practitioners of the arcane arts. It's the Buckland Museum of Witchcraft and Magic.
Welcome back to the Buckland Museum Frankenstein radio controls, appearing like a manifestation occasionally, just whenever we feel like it. So today, I declare it's officially spooky season because, it's October 1st and it's the launch of our latest show in our rotating exhibits gallery. So first, I want to thank Maja Daou for her incredible show, Witch Visions. And, we're going to talk to Stephen Romano today about his incredible show that he's curated, Apparitions, Specters, Conjures, and the Paranormal. Stephen Romano, art dealer out of New York City. Truly, he's a legend in my mind. He always lets us play with his incredible toys. So, but first, we got a little bit of business. Sunday, October 4th is a Halloween flea market. It's presented by Black Market Records in the Buckland Museum. It's an outdoor event. We urge you to order your tickets online. It's $1. And if you're watching this on our Facebook page, you'll find it in our event section. Tomorrow, October 2nd, Friday, full moon, we have something pretty special. Charming Disaster out of Brooklyn. That seems to be the place to be these days, right, Stephen? There's going to be a live stream collaboration with us. They're a Brooklyn duo that write murder ballads and love songs involving death, crime, science, folklore, and the supernatural. So, kind of our thing here. And on October 7th at 8 p.m., we're going to be chatting with author Nahw Lightfoot about her recent contributions to the Buckland collection and all sorts of other fun. And, one last thing. I want to thank everyone that contributed to our fundraiser for the Museum of Witchcraft in Cornwall, England. We made over $1,700 for them. And in a time when, people are fragrantly breaking laws and then claiming that they're witch hunts, I think it's pretty important to keep real witchcraft history alive. So anyway, welcome to the Buckland Museum, Stephen. How are things in Brooklyn?
Things are pretty cool. Having a bit of a surge. A couple of weeks over.
Well,
we're hunkered down. We've been self-quarantined since, beginning of March. Second week of March, right after the Soap show. Where at Soap we did the recreation of the William Mortensen Witches show that you graciously hosted.
Yeah, that's right. And you were doing that.
You had maybe 6,000 people, 8,000 people over 4 days.
Wow.
And of course, Mortensen being kind of the odd thing. Scope's like a kind of a neo-pop there, right? Mortensen being the odd thing was getting huge attention. And I gave out the catalogs that we posted, and met some incredible people. I mean, I apologize, her name escapes me at the moment, but she wrote the book about witches and sluts.
Oh, yeah, Kristen Soleil, who I actually am going to be talking here in a couple of weeks.
She spent a good 2 hours together and just totally hit it off. I mean,
she's rad.
She was terrific, right?
Awesome.
And I'm so bad with names, right? Matt Dillon, the last day, showed up, walked by the booth at first, and I thought he was kind of dissing the booth, and someone said, "Oh, was that Matt Dillon?" And I said, "Oh, what's he been in that's been any good?" Meanwhile, he's been in tons of shit that's great, right? But then he came back and fell in love with the work. Absolutely fell in love with it. Spent an hour and a half with us. Showed him, you just loved the Mortensens. You couldn't believe you'd never heard of it before. And then I showed him the works of Josh Stebbins that I had in Ask pages in the book, and he just freaking loved that and commissioned Josh to do his portrait. Yeah.
We have some Josh Stebbins pieces in the Apparitions show, correct?
We do. You have one Josh Stebbins piece, which is homage to William Mortensen, the creepy Zanzibar monsters there with the masks, right? So,
yeah, it's beautiful. So,
but Josh is a whole episode, right, man? He'd be like a whole episode to talk about. But no, so we've been in self-quarantine since the beginning of March, and wear our masks when we go out and stay out of trouble. And it's just, in a way, the silver lining to all of this is like a family. We've never been closer. And you know what I mean? I know other people that are having a rough time, hunkering down and being with the same people all the time. But we're 6 here, 4 girls, myself and Ami, and it's been really great that way, And thank God for the karaoke machine, right?
So what's the hit song in the karaoke machine?
It saves the day every day.
Yeah. So, could you talk a little bit about the piece right behind you, Stephen?
Oh, this thing?
Yeah.
Well, in my mind, it's one of the greatest paintings ever made by an artist, Wolfgang Ross. And it's called The Kingdom of Death. And it was made 1999, I think, 1999. So Gross, as a teenager, he was born in Dresden in Germany. And I think he was 14 or 15 years old when the Dresden bombings took place. And it was obviously a very traumatizing event for him. He spent the rest of his life pretty, very messed up, right? So this is actually a recreation in his mind, surrealistic interpretation of the Dresden bombings. Over in that corner, you see architecture from Dresden, and you see the Pope there with the crown, the Pope, the papal crown, Death and the Maiden in the center there by the boat, and that's him. Let me see right here. Where am I? Right here. That's him as the artist, and this is Martin Luther. There was a statue of Martin Luther in the city square. And this is Martin Luther again being eaten by a demon. You got the 4 horses of the apocalypse up here and the crucifixion. And Gross, shortly after the Dresden bombing, I'd say maybe 5 years after that, he was arrested by the Stasi in East Germany as he was crossing over to visit his father. And he had on his person these drawings he had made of Stalin on the gallows, and that was treasonous. So he was, at first he was sentenced to death. He says he had a death sentence. He might have just meant that it was, anyways, he was sentenced to 25 years hard labor in the concentration camp. Yeah. And the Allies liberated the concentration camp about 8 years after that. So he spent 8 years in a freaking gulag, more trauma, right?
So we have a piece by Gross in the show Apparitions. Can you talk about this a bit?
Well, this is one that he made. So after he left Germany, he moved to Australia, and then he moved to Tasmania, the northern tip of Tasmania, a place called Penguin. And so this is a painting of the Dreamtime. I'm trying to remember the exact name, or the Arente, which are so the Arente depicts mythological and spiritual focuses in the landscape, and the Dreamtime. So the Dreamtime is like an Aboriginal, almost like a vision quest, or what is this that the shamans, the South American shamans do? It's not a vision quest, something like that. But anyway, it's a way to commune with your spiritual being, right? So this is the actual name of the tribe that he was in contact with in Tasmania. Inaporta is the best I can pronounce it. So these are objects of religious significance there. The flask and the stone, I think to some extent, the hat that the guy's wearing. So Gross's work was always, he was called a fantastic realist. Like Ernst Fuchs was another one. And I'm not sure if he was friends with Giger, but they certainly had an awareness of one another. It was all kind of, that whole cluster of artists in Vienna and Berlin and Gross in Tasmania, right? So he's a very influential artist in his time, but after he died, he fell into obscurity, and I just began collecting his work. I just love it, right?
Yeah.
This is someone who comes to the masters and has technical proficiency, and his whole story, he committed suicide. We think. We're not sure, right? We're pretty sure he committed suicide, or he was murdered to make it look like suicide by a jealous lover. But the circumstances of his death were very suspicious. But towards the end of his life, he said, and I found this to be a very authentic statement. He said that he was never really sure whether he was back, he was still in the gulag dreaming of the bucolic life in Tasmania, or if he was in Tasmania having these intense nightmares about being in the gulag. He couldn't reconcile which was the reality and which was the dream, right? Which is
that's awful.
Pretty profound, right?
So this is a really fun piece that I've been enjoying.
It's great.
Enjoying the last few days. Can you tell us a little bit about this?
Well, this is actually a page from a grimoire. It has this kind of strange substance at the top, right? We're not really sure what it is, but so the material itself, and I have other pages from the same grimoire. So the consensus kind of was showing it to people, and from the source I got it from, and the consensus was is that it could possibly have dated as far back as the 17th century, right?
Yeah.
And because of a lot of the iconography on there, it doesn't come in until maybe a little bit later, or actually, substantially later, like the turn of the last century. It's kind of presupposed then that it was worked on through several decades, right? That one, what do you call it? Like one high priest would have started the image and then passed it down, and the next high priest made his notations on it, and members of the coven made their notations on it, and a lot of them have these art historical references to them, but you can tell that it's really old. It's what we call the smell test, right? Which is you put it up and you just kind of get a feel for it, right? And things that inauthentic don't have that. You can't really fake that, right? So it's very engaging, and it's also it's something that I don't think was intended to be viewed as art. Like, it was never intended to be put in a frame, put on public display, in either in a museumological context, right? So it's an authentic ceremonial object. So it doesn't have the kind of pretenses that art has, right? Art, speaks of a particular set of aesthetics or a particular narrative, or this is more naive, or it's a word I'm looking for, itinerant. This is more itinerant, right? This is more art made by folk, right?
Yeah.
That don't come from the academic continuum, so to speak, right? And that really excites me. Wolfgang Gross never spent a day in art school. All the training he got by looking at the masters, Dürer, Rembrandt, Hieronymus Bosch, studying them intensely. And he apprenticed with his grandfather, who was a renowned artist in Italy, right? But it has the feel of it. You know what I mean? It's not obsessing over academic attributes like the correct anatomical rendering of a figure or correct proportion, but somehow it all comes together. The same with this grimoire page, right? And the others that come, somehow it all comes together in a way that's very unexpected, almost like this Dada feel to it, or but it is quite astonishing, isn't it? Look at it, to be in this presence and to wonder, what the odyssey of this thing was, right?
It's like looking into somebody's like weird, exquisite corpse sketchbook. So really been enjoying this. And here's the Josh Stephens.
I got one more thing to say about it. So the person that sold me this, I said, well, where does it come from? Like, what's, the provenance is what we call it, right? Like the history of the ownership of the piece and that. And he says, well, I have a non-disclosure agreement. about it, but I can tell you that it's a very well-known musician that lives in England.
Oh, wow. There's quite a few of them that are into the occult, so.
Well, you would know, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So here's that beautiful Josh Stebbins piece here.
So great. Can I say the F word here?
Yeah, sure.
Fuck, it's fucking great. Josh is an absolutely astonishing artist. You know, from the first that I saw his work, I went, whoa, you know, here's someone who really knows how to draw, right?
Yeah.
And I don't even know if they teach drawing in art school anymore, do they?
I don't know.
I think they teach performance art and video art and how to draw with an iPad, right?
Yeah.
But that's a lost art, you know. This guy would have been a master in the medieval or Baroque period, right? So this drawing he made that's based on a very famous William Mortensen photograph where Mortensen was working on this film called West of Zanzibar with the director Todd Browning, who also did Freaks, right?
Yeah.
And Mortensen made these masks for this sort of voodoo ritual at the end. So this is Josh's rendering of that. But he made it specifically for this show that we did here in New York called Coven of the Sibylline, William Mortensen and the Coven of the Sibylline. So it was all these unseen Mortensen works. And we got artists to make tribute pieces to William Mortensen. So this was one of like 6 that Josh did that was just absolutely incredible. But whenever I post this on Instagram, it gets like incredible response on any social media. Like people just really respond to it, you know. Looks like Gonzo a bit, eh?
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty rad. So one thing I really want to go into here is some of the spirit photos.
Sure.
So how did you start collecting this stuff?
Well, you know, where to begin? You got to go back to birth.
Yeah.
No, but I won't. When I started collecting, I didn't really have the means. You know, I was working in galleries. I didn't really have the means or the resources to buy, like, you know, incredible outsider art by like Bill Traylor and Darger and whatever, you know, these things that cost like tens of thousands of dollars, right? So, but I still had that itch to scratch, right? So I started collecting vernacular photography and, you know, just snapshots that you buy at flea markets. Because my mentor in that, a guy named Frank Maresca, who has the Rico Maresca Gallery, he was really heavily into that. So I kind of quietly on the side was building my own collection. I started to notice that a lot of the photographs that I was most attracted to had this kind of paranormal feel to it, albeit not actual photographs of paranormal events, but, you know, things that have these crazy light leaks or, you know, double exposures that look like ghosts, and, you know, the imagination gets carried away and you get taken somewhere else. It brings you somewhere else. You know, you're holding this object in your hand and it's like, again, it's like vernacular, you know, vernacular spirit photography, so to speak, right? So then when I got a little more serious, you know, and I have thousands of these photographs, these vernacular, these snapshots, right? Boxes and boxes of them. And you have the very best ones there in the show. So kind of a natural, more serious extension to that was this spirit photography, which was like a practice that began in Victorian times around, you know, say about 1860 or so. And the notion was that, you know, you could sit for the photographer and you would capture the ghosts of your relatives or, you know, maybe sometimes strangers or what have you, right? But there was some connectedness to, you know, to the photograph being taken. And it's because at that time, you know, the camera as an object, as a tool was emerging and the possibilities and the capabilities of it were unknown, right? But of course, this was all very fraudulent, right? It was the photographer. We're not talking about, you know, people taking photographs of seances, you know, genuine seances where there's a, you know, electroplasm or what have you, right? We're talking about people who deliberately set out to create a fraud, so to speak, right? But in some of the cases, you know, I'm sure that the sitters were willing victims, right? But interestingly enough, on the back of that center, so these three are by the guy, you know, for spirit photography, William Pope. And I completely lucked out. I found these on eBay. And they're probably fake. I didn't pay a lot for them. It was and I got them, and they're like absolutely authentic. There's handwriting on the back of the center one there of the couple. And it describes the whole process of how they went to Cruz in England and met with Mr. Hope and how he put the negatives in a bag and they brought it to London to get it processed, and he couldn't have switched the negatives. They watched the whole time, and It's really interesting and cool. But there's an aesthetic to it, you know. There's kind of like an ethereal, despite the fact that we know it's trickery.
Yeah.
98% of it. There's an aesthetic to it that's really beautiful and quite lost. And you know, it's very influential too. You know, a lot of artists look at spirit photography and you know they really admire the aesthetic and want to kind of tap into that esoteric quality. You know, ethereal esoteric quality. So I began to collecting more and more. I mean, it's not prohibitively expensive to collect these things even now, unless it's like a major thing, right?
Yeah.
You know, just be selective and do your homework.
Yeah. So here is one of the highlights for the collection, for the show to me. I have a feeling that this, in a way, kind of like help you choose the title for the name. You know, here we have the great William Mortensen.
Yeah, it was. This was definitely the. How do you say? You know, the genesis of the show was. I had this, and DX sessioned it, and it came back to me, right? In an odd way, right? But again, we're talking about the odyssey of things, right? This one was very peculiar. So this is a work by William Mortensen, who was a photographer in the 1920s and 30s. He apprenticed with Cecil B. DeMille. He was the still photographer for the incredible film The King of Kings, The Story of Christ, which in its time was, you know, extremely cutting edge in terms of the cinematics. But yeah, so he was the still photographer for that. He also worked with Todd Browning and a number of other notable directors. But he was the hottest photographer in Hollywood in terms of portraiture, right? You could make women look so beautiful. And back in that day, that's all you had was your photos, you know, to get your interviews at the studios and an era of the cutie films, right? So he was the one who actually, from Utah, brought Fay Ray out to Hollywood. He was supposedly engaged to her sister, and Fay Ray was the prodigy of devout Mormons who were very strict. And he said he would chaperone her and be her guardian. And so, yeah, they went out to Hollywood together, and he photographed her, not extensively, but, you know, there's quite a few of them. And absolutely beautiful pieces. So they were connected in terms of their rise in Hollywood. But on the side, while he was doing this commercial work, photographing starlets and what have you, right? On the side, he was doing his own experimentation and pushing the limits of the camera, right? So he would do things with like multiple negatives, and I don't mean sandwiched in the enlarger. I mean, he would like project one negative onto the paper and then cut a mask out meticulously, cut out this mask, and then project another part in. So that's not what we're looking at here. That's two models that were in the same shot. But then how he echoed it was like by printing again and again and again and again and again, right? So these things are like paintings, you know, except for a particular kind of print that he made called, it's like a portfolio print, right? You would go to a studio and order them, and he would mass produce them off a glass negative. All these other ones, like this one in your show, was custom made, like a painting or like a drawing, right? And they all differ from one another. So this is a really interesting photograph called Obsession, and it's also subtitled, or also called Fear. And Anton LaVey, who was the founder and high priest of the Church of Satan in San Francisco, he had this place called the Black House where they would perform rituals and that. He had this piece hanging in his kitchen, I believe, right?
This one right here?
But he admired, what's that?
This one right here?
Yeah. Oh, not that specific print. No, we don't know what happened to that print, but this image, right? Wow. So that was his favorite, this one here. And what was I going to say? So yeah, Mortensen was, they never met. Mortensen was actually a Christian Scientist, which is not Scientology, right? And he was part Buddhist, I think, as well. So he never met LaVey, or he never had any connection to the Church of Satan or anything like that. But Mortensen was a huge influence on LaVey in terms of the presentation, you know, with the crisp and the astringent, so to speak. So Mortensen wrote this book called Command to Look, which was all about psychology of perception, which Anton LaVey in part dedicated the Satanic Bible to William Mortensen, among others, but notable reference to that photograph there. And in the show, you actually have two photographs by this amazing photographer, Nicholas Syracuse, who met LaVey's daughter okay, in San Francisco. And is it on there? I don't know if it's on that press release. Maybe.
I don't know.
Keep scrolling. Anyway, so he met LaVey's daughter and asked if he could have access to the house. It was emptied out. And she said, yeah, okay, because he's a really good-looking guy. Looks like Hugh Jackman, you know. So he went in, and he's going to photograph it, but realized he only had 8 exposures in his camera. So he only took 8 pictures of the inside of the Black House. I think you keep going, it might still be. It might be there. Keep going. I won't leave you astray. A lot of stuff there, man.
There's so many great pieces in the show. It's
thank you.
It's so much fun.
So I've been very blessed. There he is. Yeah. So these are photographs of murals that Anton LaVey painted inside the Black House. And at this point, when Nicholas was in there, the place was cleared out. But how funny, eh? To get that far and to only have 8, and to realize, oh my God, I've only got 8 exposures here, right? Like you're super selective, right? So yeah, they're beautiful. But
these are incredible shots.
For a second, I've been very fortunate and very blessed that I was able to. I had a significant collection before, but I was very blessed to be able to acquire the collection of his first wife, Courtney Crawford. That was some over 300 works. So I have the largest collection, the largest and probably most comprehensive collection of William Mortensen's, probably on the planet.
So we've got to talk about this piece here.
Yeah, well, you know, you probably know as much, if not more, about it than I do. It's like I acquired it as another dealer said, "Hey, I got this magic wand that I think you'd really like," and I'm like, "Oh, okay, interesting, right?" So he brings this thing over, and he's holding it in the bubble wrap, right? And he says, "Well, you're not supposed to touch it." I'm like, "Come on, man! What kind of sales pitch is this, right?" He says, "Yeah, you're not supposed to touch it, right?" I'm like, "Oh, okay, right." So like holding it.
I touched it.
Yeah, I know. So did I. Like it took me like 2 days before I thought, forget this bullshit, right? So what we have is purportedly from the early 1800s from Boston. And, you know, at that time, Boston was a big mariners place or whatever. And the mariners, you know, to some extent were involved in occult practice as well, you know, to put out blessings so that they could get the catch, or however you want to say it.
Yeah.
So, but this one's really interesting because tell me what the guy's name. I can never pronounce his name. Levi. How do you say it? Elias?
Levi is what it's the whole occult reader never says this stuff out loud. So
right. So he had some interesting emblems, you know, in his book about the what do you call it, the noetic circle, and a lot of them are directly referenced on this wand, but this wand predates his writings by about 40 years or so, you know, purportedly 20, 30, 40 years or so. So there must have been some kind of underground practice. Now, the name inscribed on there, Amasaric, I've done extensive research and not been able to find an awful lot about Amasaric. So what purportedly it is the demon, or the, how do you call it, the entity, or the spirit, or the spice and vegetation. So my sense is that this is probably used in, and I'm speculating, right? Anybody that has any other ideas or knowledge, you know, fire away.
Yeah, please.
This was used in ceremony to actually handle the spices. So you don't actually touch the spices, right? Once they're empowered with magical properties, or so to speak, because it kind of feels like a letter opener. It's not a letter opener, right? It kind of has that flat end to it, like a butter knife for a letter. So obviously there's mass here, so it would do something, right? But a very powerful object, and you know, it's got amazing action. Do you know what I mean by that? Do you play guitar?
I don't, but I know exactly what you mean by it.
It's like the movement you can make on the fret, so that the fret is invisible. It's so well crafted that this has amazing action. You know, you hold it. Don't try this, maybe. But try it under a pillow, right? You hold it right where the skull and the bone meet, and it balances perfectly. And you can actually, like, it's really hard to drop, right? It's really incredibly crafted in terms of the weight of it, right?
Yeah.
Which is another mystery. But kind of the grandest mystery of this thing, other than the mystical symbols and the craftsmanship. And my friend Clifford actually had this really very perceptive observation. He says, the thing about this is that you kind of wonder who would have the craftsmanship to be able to carve that out, because it is quite intricate. I know scrimshaw, and it's whalebone, it's scrimshaw, right? And it's not easy to work with, right? Who would have the technical proficiency to be able to carve that out of scrimshaw and have the occult, have the quite sophisticated and advanced occult knowledge for that time, even for now, actually? Who kind of person would be able to mesh those two things together, right? And at the end of the day, you want to talk about what makes a work of art great. For me, it's like, you got to have the technical proficiency. You got to be able to work with the materials, right? I mean, you can have happy accidents like Francis Bacon and Goya and whatever, right? But you got to be able to speak the language of your craft, right? So there's that, and then it has to be about something. It has to be. You have to have a vision. You have to have something that you want to say, something to advance. Something that's in generosity to the spirit of man, or spirit of mankind, right?
Yeah.
The greater the better. And then the third aspect is how these two things come together, right? How your technique and your vision, how that's executed in the work. And to me, this is a really good example of that. And that, is a really good example of that. And that's that is what I look for, in works of art that move me, ultimately to inspire awe, right? And the greatest accomplishment, or the greatest pleasure, or the greatest achievement is to be able to share it, right? To be able to put it out there on your fucking wall and say, look at this stuff, and hopefully it inspires awe in somebody else, and they take that or they see it as an affirmation. They see this art as an affirmation for the left-hand path, or to break away from the hegemony. Look at these artists, who made this stuff. These aren't people who are these aren't people who bought into the hegemony. These are people who are advanced thinkers and visionaries, and to tap in and to perpetuate that aspect of us, to bring that out, peel off another layer of the onion, right, and be a seer.
That's one of the best ways I've ever heard this, but it's It's the
coffee talking.
So let's talk about Darcilio Lima here really quick.
You lucky bastard.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The reason I say that for anybody who's listening is, for us, places like the Buckland Museum and the Morbid Anatomy, and I would say Catland Books in Brooklyn, and they're epicenters for the community of us who feel like, for us weirdos, right? For us who, maybe because of our sensibility, we alienate our neighbors a little bit, and they're not too sure about us, right? But when you have these communal centers, it brings people together, and in celebration of that, I like to be supportive. So we recently donated a masterpiece by Darcilio Lima to the museum, and hopefully it'll find its place there. Hopefully it'll find its place. So
I was looking at it earlier today, and it is so amazing.
Right? So Darcilio Lima was the guy who lived in a coastal fishing village in northern Brazil.
Thank you.
A place that you're very welcome. A place that you couldn't even find on a map, probably. But there was a mythology to the place that there was a well in the middle of the town that had like a rod going through it. A big, I don't know what the rod was made out of, maybe brass or something. And the story was that the well was dug and the rod was inserted to contain a giant serpent that lived under the town. I can't remember the town. Cassel, I think it was called. But it's a small little fishing village, right? So Lima grew up as a child with this notion of mythology, right? and was very proficient at making art at a very young age, right? He was like a prodigy. He had his first one-person show at his school, and he was 10 years old, right? And we've seen some of the drawings. They're very accomplished, right? So he was an advanced mind. He was a seer, a thinker, a visionary, but, you know, drawing rocks and beaches and stuff, right? So he set out to go to, what's the capital of Brazil? Not Sao Paulo?
I don't know.
It'll come to me. I can't believe I'm drawing a blank on this. Rio de Janeiro. Sorry. So he set out to go to Rio de Janeiro in his late teens and just completely immersed himself in the underground scene. Right. Experimented with drugs and read about alchemy and religion and philosophy and art and hung out with like all kinds of people and just completely immersed himself to the point where he oversaturated and he kind of fried his brain out a bit on these drugs, experimented with his own sexuality. So he had nervous breakdown and went to this outpatient facility that was heavily interested in art therapy. And the dominant abstract painter of the day, Ivan Serpa in Brazil, mentored Darcilio Lima, you know, got him out of the hospital, brought him to his house. They lived together for 2 years. Ivan Serpa was a really cool guy, kind of like a mystical hippie sort of, right? And then Darcilio Lima started to get his own recognition. So as you can see, the work is very complex. And the way he thought of it as was like the Tibetan monks in a way, right? That he was actually creating a conjure to manifest the good spirits to fight against the malevolent, to keep the malevolent spirits at bay. So the art piece itself is like a blessing, or it's like a talisman. And whoever becomes the proprietor of this art or talisman, they become protected as well. So to me, this is coherent. This is the artist as practitioner of witchcraft, right? In one of the most sublime examples, right? But later in life, Darcilio, he traveled to Europe and lived in a graveyard in France and was friends with Dali and Mobius and I think Jodorowsky also. Really was part of the scene there. Came back to Brazil to huge acclaim, big one-person show, big book on him, you know, etc., and disappeared, you know. And wow. Years later, a journalist found him back in his hometown, but all like disheveled and kind of like the town, what do you call it? Not the town crier, but it's really hard to describe, right? And he was speaking in gibberish, right? You could not understand what he was saying, right? But apparently the Baptist church had taken him in and cared for him and gave him like a room in the back of the church with a dirt floor. And he'd somehow got all this paper. It was scattered all over the place. And the church had convinced him that his work was graven. And he needed to destroy all of it. So he set out to do that. He set out to destroy all the work that he could have access to. And very little of it survived. I would say probably no more than 150 works out of thousands, because he did editions. And
why do great artists do this? I mean, Cameron, she destroyed a lot of her work. I mean, I'm sure you could list numbers of people. Like, it's always heartbreaking to hear.
Yeah.
So, Stephen, I got to open the museum in 22 minutes. So, do you have one last piece that you really want to talk about here before we wrap up? Should I just start browsing? These are all incredible.
No need to go any further, is there?
No. That's
one of the all-time greatest works of art, right? This is
it is so cool.
Yeah. And I know it's in good hands over there.
I feel like I'm Gregory Corso from the Ninth Gate holding it, you know?
Yeah.
It's I've never held anything like this before. So thank you for the experience, Stephen.
Well, I have my backup copy.
Wow.
Okay. This is a little different. So for those in the audience, this is the 1849 edition of the Magica Naturalis by Faust that was printed by a publisher in Germany in the mid-1800s who printed all kinds of books on alchemy and magic, and I have quite a few of his books actually. They're all incredible, right? But so on display, is it in a bookcase or is it in that shelf I gave you, or
it's in a bookcase?
Yeah. So if you're nice,
or it's on a shelf like a.
Yeah, if you're nice, Stephen might
contain.
Browse through it for you, right? But what this is it's a book of conjures, apparently written by Johann Faust, right? Doctor, I don't know how you say, Jonathan Faust or whatever. And so the edition that Stephen has in the show has all the spells and what phase of the moon you conjure. Or, no, it's not. Sorry, not the moon. What phase of the planetary alignment you would conjure a specific demon for a specific purpose? How you would make the candles? What incense you would use? What prayers you would use to conjure? How you would empower them with the task that you want them to set out? How to contain them, and most importantly, how to send them back. Right? Don't forget to read that. But it's
right there.
Yeah, it's absolutely sublime. Where's my camera? There we go. But yeah, so the version you have is the actual version. This is a version that I picked up, and it's quite a mystery. It has these markings in it that I've never been able to either find someone who can tell me what these are. Like, I assume that's like a planetary symbol. Could be, right? And we don't know what this is. It's not marker. It's ink, right? But it has all these strange. So I don't know. I think it might have been used. Like, what's that? Anybody know what that is? What is that?
If you know, put it in the comments.
Yeah. Or if you'd like to see pictures of it or something, right? So, anyways, this is one of my all-time favorite objects. This book, and
incredible.
It's opened more doors to me than any other object I've had. I mean. You know, whenever I'm with like an artist that I'm meeting for the first time that I admire, or someone where I need to break the ice and like make a bond with, I always say, "Oh, you want to see something amazing, right?" And they're like, "What's that?" Right? And I show them this, and they're every time it's like, "Oh, fuck, what is this?" Right? So, yeah, incredible, absolutely incredible stuff, man.
Yeah.
And, I've never loaned it out before. I had it in the show that I curated at Morbid Anatomy back in 2015, I think it was. But it was under glass, right? So you have my blessing because I know you know how to handle things, right?
Yeah, I do.
You have my blessing if someone goes, "Oh, can we see that?" Or just you make sure you hold it, right? Because I think the front cover is about to come off. Right?
Yeah.
But in terms of objects that I love, this is.
It's extraordinarily beautiful. And I have to ask, those must be hand painted pieces, right?
No, these are printed. I don't think they're hand painted. I never occurred to me to think about it. I assume that I think they're printed because these are the same as.
Okay.
When you have, but they're very beautifully printed. Like for instance, just give me 1 second here. Oh damn it! Where's that page? Page with the guy with the birds. It's actually, I had someone look at it, and it's actually really silver and gold in there. But I was gonna say. Yeah, now I can't find that goddamn page. Like, how great is that, right?
Yeah, that thing's amazing.
And there's a translation,
right?
There's a translation to it that came out a couple of years ago. This guy in Mexico City had the whole thing translated. Did a beautiful job. And now, for those of us that don't read Old German, right? Now we can see what all the spells were and what all the, all the different attributes are to the illustrations. Like, how about that, right?
So, Stephen, we have a question here.
Okay.
It's kind of fun. Was it expensive to acquire? What is it to get a book like that?
No.
No?
No, in fact, here's a little story. It was actually sold to a very famous rock star. I bought these books from this dealer up in Toronto. She has great stuff. And we were just chatting one Sunday morning on Facebook. And she says, I said, what's your favorite book, right? And she told me, right? And she says, what's yours? I said, I'd kill for a copy of the Magica Naturalis. And she says, that's really too bad because I just sold a copy of it last week to a major American rock star. And I was like, that's too bad. And then she said, yeah. She says, well, if I find another one, I'll let you know, but probably not likely. And then a few days later, she says, hey, the guy blew me off. His assistant says, yeah, we'll get to it when we get to it, right? So if you want it, it's yours, right? So I can't say who the rock star was, right? But it should be fairly obvious. So yeah, I paid her the money immediately to get it, right?
Yeah.
It was under $5,000.
Wow.
This was much less actually, because this came from another source. But books can be expensive, I mean, a copy of what's that famous book with the skeletons and all that? Not Day of the Dead, but it's escaping me at the moment. The one where it shows death and all the different vernacular scenes. The Dance of Death.
Yeah.
Dance of Death. Copy that's going to run you like anywhere between $250,000 to $500,000. There was a Vonage manuscript that sold a few weeks ago. Another copy of it in London or something.
Yeah.
I don't know what that went for. It must have gone for several million, right? But you can. I mean, just my advice to everybody is just keep checking eBay. As crazy as it sounds. You want a Hieronymus Bosch? Just keep checking eBay. In a few years, when's it going to turn up?
Yeah.
Get this book, okay?
And
copy the one you have. Copy the one you have. I saw it for $600 in Germany. I was like, what? And I thought, it must be a reproduction, right?
Yeah.
And sure enough, my dealer in Toronto calls me and says, I just bought an original one for $600 on eBay. And I was like, just keep your eyes open, man, and find the subject that you're interested in. Ectoplasm, memento mori, witch painting, mask, right? And just keep seeing what comes up, and eventually your eye will get fine-tuned, like, walking into a dark room, you adjust to the light. And then pretty soon, and the time comes before we're ready for it, pretty soon you got 1,000 things under your bed, literally, right?
Yeah.
Photographs and masks and pieces of
drawing. Pretty amazing like that.
What's that?
I've been to your house before, and it's pretty incredible like that.
Well, it's like for every one of these, there's 10 things that I don't know what to do with. Maybe I'll develop an appreciation for them.
Yeah.
At some point, right? But the art we love is the art we love. The heart wants what the heart wants. But that's my advice to anybody who wants to enrich their lives.
I think that's
on themselves and just start by getting stuff that you'll probably think of as mistakes later, but at least it gets you started, right? And then you find out what you like and what turns you on.
So, Stephen, it looked like people are already at the door looking to come in and see this incredible show that you put together. And they're looking at the watches, wondering why I'm not open yet. Well, I open at noon.
We put together, brother.
Well, you let me play with your toys, and I'm.
You inspired me to put the thing together. So you had as big a part, and I made it for you. So.
Well. That is really sweet. So, hey, actually.
And I would like to inspire anybody who's listening to
hold on a second.
Support the museum generously. And
the museum, man, I help you.
Open the door. Open the door.
Oh, yeah. Give me 2 minutes, all right? All right, thank you. Okay.
Oh, brother, knock them dead.
Yeah, I appreciate it so much, Stephen. And thanks to everybody that asked questions. Sorry we couldn't get to them all, but I'm sure we're going to talk to Stephen again before the show is over because
before the week is over.
It's very dense. All right, so thank you everyone for tuning in. I got to prep the museum, but You know, today's October 1st, so spooky season has begun. And I just want everyone out there to remember to stay spooky, my friends. All right.